The room that time forgot. A secret they were never meant to hear. A scream that no one ever came for. A girl erased from history, not by death but by sill. There is a kind of evil that doesn't wear horns. It wears pearls, silk gloves, and a practiced smile. It doesn't raise its voice. It locks the door, walks away, pretends nothing happened. In the heart of Poitiers, France, in a mansion admired by polite society. A young woman disappeared, not into the forest, not onto a ship, but into a single room, a prison inside her own home. Her name was Blanche Monnier, and she did not vanish. She was hidden, buried alive. The year was 1876. And what followed was a secret so grotesque, so psychologically disturbing, it was kept out of official history books, not because it wasn't known, but because it was inconvenient. You see, Blanche had committed a crime, not murder, not treason. Her crime was love. She dared to love a man who wasn't deemed worthy by her mother, a man too old, too poor, too beneath the family's aristocratic name. And so, her punishment was not public. It was private. It was methodical. She was locked inside a single room. No light, no bed, no contact. Just a straw mat crawling with lice, rats chewing at her skin, the air thick with rotting food and human waste. She would remain there for 25 years. Think about that. 5 years. Over 9,000 days of darkness. Over 200,000 hours of silence. And the world did nothing. Because the world never knew. This wasn't just the crime of a cruel mother. It was the symptom of a deeper sickness, a system of control, silence, and reputation. A world where appearances mattered more than truth, where women were disposable, and shame was punished with invisible prisons. But Blanche's story is more than a tragedy. It's a window, a keyhole, a warning. And once you peer through it, you don't come back the same. Masks of the matriarch, the woman who buried her daughter alive. They called her Madame Monnier. To the world, she was a widow of high status, elegant, composed, the keeper of legacy. The kind of woman who shook hands with judges, dined with clergy, and controlled conversations without raising her voice. But behind those manicured fingers were hands stained with a daughter's stolen life. You must understand something. Madame Monnier didn't lose her mind. She wasn't deranged. She was calculated. When Blanche refused to abandon the man she loved, a modest lawyer with no wealth or title, her mother made a decision. A quiet declaration of war against disobedience, against passion, against individual will. And so, Blanche was locked in. Not for a night. Not until her mother calmed down. For decades. The door was sealed. The shutters nailed shut. Meals, if they could be called that, were slid through a crack, just enough to sustain her body, not her spirit. That was the point. This was not punishment. This was programming. A ritual of slow erasure. A silent doctrine passed down through generations. Control is order. Obedience is purity. Silence is survival. And make no mistake, this wasn't just one woman's madness. This was the system doing what it was designed to do: crush resistance, punish deviation, maintain the mask. Blanche's disappearance wasn't investigated. No questions asked. Because polite society had an unspoken pact. Don't look too closely. Don't ask what's behind the door. Don't disturb the illusion. That's how corruption hides, in homes with white curtains, in families with perfect reputations, in mothers who'd rather watch their daughters rot in darkness than see them live in freedom. And what's worse, the world let it happen. Neighbors never asked. Doctors were never called, even when the stench of decay began to seep from the walls. Hay looked away, because to confront the truth would be to confront the lie of their entire world. And that they couldn't risk. Blanche became a ghost before she died. And her mother? She remained adored, honored, feared. This wasn't maternal love gone wrong. This was power, weaponized through tradition, wielded with elegance, executed without remorse. And if you think this kind of control is extinct, you haven't been paying attention. Architecture of obedience, how society protects monsters in silk. There are prisons made of stone, and there are prisons made of silence. Blanche Monnier's cell wasn't hidden in the woods. It wasn't buried beneath the earth. It was in the center of town, behind polished doors, curtains drawn, tea being poured in the parlor, and everyone walked by. Understand this. No system of oppression survives unless it is protected, not just by enforcers, but by bystanders, by tradition, by culture, by willful blindness. The Monnier home wasn't isolated. It was surrounded by neighbors, servants, extended family. Every day for 25 years, the woman who had once been the jewel of her city starved, screamed, decayed in a dark chamber while the world outside pretended nothing was wrong. Why? Because Madame Monnier was respected. Because her reputation mattered more than her daughter's freedom. Because to speak out would mean confronting the ugly truth that evil doesn't always wear rags. Sometimes it wears lace. What we are looking at here is the architecture of obedience. An invisible web where reputation is currency and questioning authority is betrayal. Blanche wasn't just punished for love. She was punished for defiance, for having her own will, her own desire. And society, that polished, smiling, upstanding society, closed ranks around her abuser. Even when Blanche's screams leaked into the floorboards, even when the odor of rot seeped through the bricks, no one dared confront the family. Why? Because deep down they knew, if Blanche could be broken for disobedience, so could they. This is how control is maintained, not through open violence, but through unspoken fear. Not by burning witches in the square, but by locking them in bedrooms, one generation at a time. Hidden abuse. Psychological programming. Sanitized cruelty. How the system rewires human will into submission. Evil. What happens to a human mind, the truth about stories, when it's stripped of time, like Blanche's, is rarely light, told, of language. Because if we told them honestly, you begin to understand something horrifying. Our institutions don't stop monsters. That you don't need chains to build a prison. Feed them. You just need repetition, applaud them, isolation, and as long as the curtains stay closed, over perception, the monster remains a matriarch, a judge. Blanche Monnier, priest, didn't just lose her freedom. She lost her grip on reality. Rot. Not because she was mentally ill when she entered that room, but because the room made her that way. This was more than captivity. It was psychological warfare. Silent, unrelenting, ritualized. And here's the part that should make your blood run cold. The same principles that broke Blanche are used today. In families, in schools, in media, in governments. Let's break it down. First, isolation. Cut the subject off from all outside influence. Control what they hear, what they see. No voices except yours. No truth but the one you feed them. This is how cults work. How toxic families function. How regimes maintain loyalty. Second, starvation. Not always of food, but of meaning. Deny the person anything that affirms their identity. No books, no names, no mirrors. Just a shrinking world until the only reflection they see is yours. Third, inconsistency. Punish and reward at random. Keep them guessing. Keep them unstable. Never let them feel safe. The brain, desperate to survive, begins to accept whatever narrative explains the chaos, even if it's a lie. Finally, time distortion. No clocks. No calendar. Just the endless now. Eventually, even memory bends. And when memory breaks, obedience replaces selfhood. Blanche was not just hidden. She was reformatted, turned from a woman with dreams and rebellion into a ghost who whispered to the walls. And here's the forbidden truth, the one no institution wants you to see. The techniques used on Blanche, they've been refined, modernized, demarketed. It's no longer about locking you in a room. It's about locking your mind inside someone else's story. The story that says, be quiet, follow the rules, don't ask questions, smile for the camera. But that voice telling you to behave, it's not yours. It never was. It was installed. The letter that shattered the lie. When truth slipped through the cracks, for 25 years, no one asked. No one knocked. No one listened to the silence bleeding through the walls. But then, one piece of forbidden truth escaped. A letter. Anonymous, undated, a whisper carved into paper, delivered to the Paris Attorney General. The kind of letter most officials might ignore, except this one carried a weight that stank of rot and something worse. Truth. Monsieur Attorney General, it began. I have the honor to inform you of an exceptionally serious occurrence. A spinster locked in Madame Monnier's house, half-starved, living in filth for 25 years. That was all it took. One letter, one crack in the perfect lie. The authorities arrived like unwanted light. And what they found wasn't just horrifying. It was undeniable. They pried open the upstairs door, sealed for decades. The stench hit first, then the darkness, then her, Blanche, naked, skeletal, eyes recoiling from the light like it was poison. She weighed just 55 pounds, surrounded by rotting food, feces, bones of rats that had died feeding off her suffering. She hadn't screamed in years. There was no point. The room had become her reality, a cage of soundless days and decaying hope. And now, light was back. But it didn't heal. It burned. This was the moment society could no longer pretend. The mask cracked. The illusion shattered. The monster wore a mother's face. When they arrested Madame Monnier, she didn't weep. She didn't apologize. She said calmly that she had done it to protect Blanche, to protect the family name, to preserve order. Let that settle in your bones, because that is the logic of the system. We destroy you for your own good. We bury the truth to maintain peace. We cage the wild to keep the world clean. But the letter, that single act of rebellion, XP, boasts something ancient and terrifying, that beneath every polished institution, beneath every noble lineage, there is a lie just waiting to rot. And sometimes, all it takes is one truth, delivered at the right moment, to light the fuse. So ask yourself, what other letters never made it? What other truths are still locked behind smiling doors? Because if Blanche's door hadn't been opened, she would have died in that silence. And no one, not even you, would have ever known she existed. Rituals of reputation. Why the elite? Sacrifice their own to preserve power. There is something older than laws, older than kings, older than even religion. It's called reputation. A silent god worshipped by the powerful, not out of love, but fear. Fear of exposure, fear of shame. Fear that the fragile illusion they've spent generations crafting might crumble under the weight of one inconvenient truth. And in that religion of appearance, sacrifice is sacred. In Blanche's case, the offering was her life. Her mother didn't kill her outright. No, that would have been too messy, too obvious. She buried her in silence, preserved her like a corpse on display for no one to see, all in the name of the Monnier name. You see, to the elite, a scandal is worse than a crime, because a crime can be hidden. A scandal spreads. A scandal makes the mask slip. A scandal lets the rest of the world see that they're just as human and just as monstrous as the rest of us, and they cannot allow that. So what do? They devour their own. Not openly, not violently, but through a kind of ritualized abandonment. When a daughter steps out of line, she is erased. When a son disgraces the name, he is exiled. Not because the family hates them, but because the system demands a blood price. This isn't new, it's ancient. From Roman senators forcing their own children to suicide for disgrace, to Victorian families locking mad daughters in attics, to modern dynasties erasing black sheep from the family photo. It's all the same. The sacrifice of the individual for the illusion of the institution. Madame Monnier didn't act alone. She acted as an extension of a deeper system, one that whispers, better to lose a child than lose your status. Better to bury a life than bury your legacy. That's not motherhood. That's ritual. That's priesthood under the god of power. So when Blanche begged to be free, what her mother heard was not desperation. What she heard was threat, because if Blanche could choose love, if Blanche could follow her own desire, then the whole game of control, of family, of society, of knowing your place, falls apart. That could not be allowed. And so she was sacrificed, not just to preserve a lie, but to prove that no one is beyond the reach of obedience. Not even blood. The mind after the silence. What 25 years in darkness does to the human soul. There are wounds that bleed, and there are wounds that whisper. Blanche Monnier didn't just emerge from that room broken. She emerged as something else. Something no one recognized. Not a woman. Not a victim. Not even a survivor. But a soul, caught in permanent exile from reality. After 25 years of darkness, even the light became pain. Doctors recorded her trembling at the sight of a candle. She turned her face from windows. Her pupils, once alive with youth, had become mirrors, black and empty, not from madness, but from sensory starvation. You have to understand, when you are left alone that long, time doesn't pass. It dissolves, language fades, memories erode, even the concept of self, I am, begins to collapse. You become obedience with a heartbeat. This is what institutional cruelty does. It doesn't always kill you. It remakes you into silence. When Blanche was finally freed, she didn't rejoice. She didn't cry out in vengeance. She shrank. The world had become too large, too loud, too fast. Because the brain, when caged for too long, adapts to that cage. It makes prison home. This is why captives return to abusers. Why trauma survivors sometimes defend the very people who hurt them. It's not weakness. It's neurological. It's conditioning. Blanche was institutionalized for the rest of her life. She never married, never reclaimed her name, never stood before the court and screamed for justice. She simply existed, in a different kind of room, one with walls padded instead of rotting, but still, a room. And here's the truth the world wants to ignore. You can kill a person without ending their heartbeat. All you have to do is kill their story, their voice, their right to feel safe inside their own mind. Blanche Monnier's story isn't just about captivity. It's about what happens after the door opens, when the damage has already been done, when freedom comes too late, when the soul is still shackled, long after the lock is broken, the inheritance of fear, how generational control still shapes you today. What if I told you Blanche's prison didn't end with her? That the cage she lived in, dark, silent, absolute, never really went away. It simply evolved. Because the truth is this: you were born into her inheritance, not a mansion, not wealth, but fear, a fear that was crafted long before you ever opened your eyes. Fear of standing out, fear of questioning rules, fear of being too much, fear of being cast out. If you ever dared to become fully yourself, that's not accidental. That's design. Generational control doesn't need walls and keys anymore. It lives in rituals, in warnings disguised as advice, in shame passed from mother to daughter, from father to son, like sacred scripture. Don't speak until spoken to. Don't embarrass the family. Don't chase dreams that make people uncomfortable. Play your part. Know your place. Stay inside the script. And so we do. We clip our own wings. We betray our own passions. We dim our light so no one else feels blind. And when the cage doesn't work, they build a mirror. So you see yourself as the problem, so you self-correct, self-sabotage, self-destruct. Just like Blanche, you become the jailer and the prisoner. Only now, the door is invisible. This is how control survives the centuries, not by brute force, but by embedding itself into the architecture of identity. And here's where the legacy gets darker. Every time you silence your truth to keep the peace, every time you betray your instinct to please others, you feed the system. Because the Monnier mansion isn't just a place, it's a blueprint. A template repeated in households, corporations, religions, governments, where reputation matters more than reality, where obedience is safety, where truth is dangerous. But the moment you recognize it, you can begin to reclaim yourself. So, if you're still with me, drop this in the comments twice, to awaken the algorithm and your identity. The door is open, but the cage is inside me. The door is open, but the cage is inside me. Let the system see it. Let the others feel it. This is not just about Blanche. It's about you. And what you do with the keys now resting in your hands. The polite face of power, why evil hides in respectable places. We've been taught a lie. That evil is chaotic, that it's loud, ugly, violent. But real evil is quiet, polished, orderly. It opens doors for guests. It pays taxes. It sends flowers to funerals. Because the most dangerous evil isn't the kind that breaks the rules. It's the kind that writes them. Think about Madame Monnier. She wasn't a monster in rags. She wasn't foaming at the mouth. She was elegant, dignified. A mother, a widow. Respected by judges, priests, and businessmen. She hosted dinners, donated to charities, advised young women on etiquette. And all the while, her daughter was rotting above her, covered in filth, starving for air, light, and love. That's how the system works. It doesn't hide evil in darkness. It wraps it in decorum. Because people don't question the priest. They don't investigate the banker. They don't knock on the doors of the politician's summer home. Reputation is a cloak, a force field around the elite. It says, "This one couldn't possibly be guilty. Look how well they speak. Look how well she dresses. Look how normal everything seems." But behind that mask, deals are made, lives are sold, and sometimes children are buried alive in bedrooms. You think this ended with Blanche? Look around. Institutions still cover up abuse. Schools silence whistleblowers. Religious leaders shuffle predators instead of confronting them. Corporations know how to smile for the cameras, while outsourcing suffering to invisible hands across the sea. The illusion is precise, strategic, effortless, because when evil wears a crown, it becomes lawful. When it wears a badge, it becomes order. When it wears a robe, it becomes holy. And we, the public, trained to respect appearances, become loyal guard dogs for the very wolves feeding on our kin. So remember this, evil doesn't knock down the front door. It uses the spare key we gave it. And then it asks for tea. Truth as treason. Why they punish the ones who speak. If silence is currency, then truth is treason. It always has been. The moment Blanche's letter surfaced, that quiet page scrawled by a faceless soul, the entire illusion began to collapse. Not just for the Monnier family, but for every neighbor who looked away, every officer who never noticed, every friend who said, "She probably just moved." And here's what you must understand. Truth doesn't just reveal corruption, it humiliates the system. It says, you knew, you watched, you obeyed, and systems built on image cannot afford to be shamed. That's why whistleblowers lose everything. That's why revolutionaries are called insane, why journalists are imprisoned, why survivors are questioned, smeared, erased. Because in the eyes of the powerful, truth is not noble, it's disloyal. Blanche didn't write that letter. She couldn't. But someone did, and in doing so they committed a sacred betrayal. They exposed the machinery behind the mask. And the machine doesn't forgive that. Look around. The employee who exposes corporate poison gets fired. The soldier who reveals war crimes gets court-martialed. The child who tells on a trusted adult gets ignored or blamed. Truth is punished. Not because it's false, but because it's true. Because once truth is spoken, the system must make an example of the speaker. So the rest stay silent. Ask yourself, why don't more people expose the monsters? Because they've seen what happens when someone does. Blanche's freedom came at a price. Not to her abuser. She died days after arrest. But to Blanche herself. She was never celebrated, never compensated, never healed. She was freed, but not honored, because her very existence was a reminder of the lie. And systems don't like reminders, so here's the real warning. If you start speaking truth, you will be tested. Not with bullets, but with doubt, mockery, isolation, erasure, because the greatest threat to the system is not violence. It's awareness, and every truth you speak is a crack in the wall, so choose your words like weapons, and speak anyway. The cult of the normal, how society manufactures obedient minds. There's a reason you didn't hear Blanche Monnier's story in school. It's not because it's unimportant, it's because it's too important. Because if you truly saw what happened to her, you'd begin to question everything you were taught to call normal, and that is dangerous. You see, we don't live in a world of free thought. We live in a world of manufactured minds. From the moment you're born, you're offered one currency, acceptance, but only if you comply. Only if you fit the mold. Only if you smile when you're told. Even when your soul screams. It starts small. Sit still. Don't speak out. Color inside the lines. Memorize. Obey. Forget. Then it gets deeper. Don't question your church. Don't criticize your flag. Don't challenge your father. Don't outshine your peers. You think this is education? It's not. It's indoctrination. A silent ritual designed to turn wild minds into domesticated tools. creative beings into compliant workers, rebels into replicators. This is the cult of the normal, and it has no building, no temple, because the entire world is the altar. Blanche wasn't destroyed because she was weak. She was destroyed because she broke the spell. She loved the wrong person. She followed her instinct. She refused to kneel at the altar of image, obedience, and quiet suffering. And so she was punished, not just by her mother, but by every polite smile that looked the other way. Because normal isn't safe. Normal is sacred to the system. And when you violate it, even in love, you become an infection to be purged. Think about the labels you've heard. Weird. Troubled. Disrespectful. Too intense. Too emotional. Too much. Every time you heard them, the cult was speaking. It was warning you, get back in line, or we'll turn on you too. This is why most men never wear. Because the cost of awakening, sir, is exile. But here's the truth they won't tell you. You were not made to fit in. You were made to see, to remember, to reclaim what the system buried, your fire, your hunger, your sovereignty. So burn the mold, because obedience is not peace. It's just a quieter kind of death. Blood in the foundation. Why every system is built on a lie. There is no neutral ground, no clean history, no pure institution. Look beneath any system that claims order, and you'll find blood in its foundation. Every palace is built on a battlefield. Every courtroom echoes with silenced screams. Every throne was carved by those who were never allowed to sit. You think that's dramatic? No. That's truth. The kind that gets erased from textbooks, burned from libraries, and mocked by the comfortable. Let's return to Blanche. What happened to her wasn't a personal tragedy. It was a blueprint, a map of how systems protect themselves. Because for the world to work the way it does, for the rich to stay untouchable, for the obedient to stay afraid, there must be a lie that everyone agrees to believe. And here it is. That structure equals justice. That the rules are for your safety. That the powerful earned their place. But Blanche's story rips that lie open. Because behind every respected family, every flawless reputation, every honored tradition, there is a room, sealed, rotting, silent. It might not hold a woman. Maybe it holds a truth, a secret, a whistleblower, a question that no one is allowed to ask. And as long as that room stays locked, the house stands tall. The Monnier mansion didn't collapse when Blanche was freed. No. It stayed upright. Because the system survived. It simply moved on. Changed its curtains. Buried the evidence. Rebranded. But if you listen closely, you can still hear her story in the walls of the world you live in the corporations where dissent is crushed quietly, in the churches that preach purity while hiding predators, in the governments that talk liberty while signing deals behind closed doors. It's always the same game. Control through ritual, silence through shame, power through illusion. The structures you walk, Just every day, the ones that seem so solid, so permanent, are built on someone else's obedience, and if that obedience ever wavers, the system knows what to do. It always has. Ask Blanche. She broke the spell, and they buried her alive. So look again at the world around you. Ask yourself, what room has been sealed in your own life, and who benefits from you never opening that door?